Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, guys, the Jerusalem Post on the 18th of April did a little bit of research on the genealogy of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Now, what's interesting is, again, like I said, numerology, and I did the previous post to this, which was Alhama Part 2, and we mentioned how the 3 6s are mentioned and all these ports, and then you realize who's behind all of this, and even the Jerusalem Post falls into the same category, and you can't tell me that this is all just um, coincidence, because I'd certainly have to disagree with you. What we see over here is the number 18 is a division of 3 6s, right? And the article starts with that. And now moving down is this article, which is interesting, in the Jerusalem Post. The US presidential nominee purported descendants of royal affair 18 generations ago. Again, right? The 3 6s, right? 18. It's just so obvious. It's unbelievable. And then how they use the colors. Again, it's the two opposites, and moving down, the female and the male, blonde hair, right? And apparently they're related. And what really drew my attention to this particular article, and certainly there's no chance in this, is again where the genealogy starts from. Okay, so it starts from King Edward III and Philippa of Hainault, and you've got John of Gaunt, first Duke of Lancaster. Now, Lancaster happens to be my um, uh, well, I fall under the encatchment of Lancaster, and it's certainly my neck of the woods. And Catherine Swanford is the Duchess of Lancaster. Okay, and this is where their genealogy starts from, both of them. So you've got Donald Trump, and then you've got Hillary Clinton. Now, what's interesting is that they mentioned 18 generations. Okay, and 18 is certainly an important number to them. And when you go down the genealogy of these individuals, and this is done by the Jerusalem Post, it's a very serious paper, by the way, all the way down, what you find is Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are basically 18th generation bloodline relatives. And this is important, that they're basically facing one another at a very, very important time, era in humanity. And it's all deliberate by design. What's also interesting is during election date, for those of you who don't know, is that he's going to turn 70 and 7 months and 7 days. And the 3 sevens, again in numerology, is a divine number, right? And again, it extends into numerology and the occult. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is not just the 18 generations. Now, whilst I was in the UAE, I had an MD whose father was in the British Navy, very high up in the British Navy, and that MD was the alumni of Jamie Cadbury, who was the heir to the Cadbury's empire. And they studied, I understand, at Eton together, and so did Prince Harry, and they all fall into the same kind of generation gap. And again, the birds of a feather, of a flock fly together. And this particular, my MD had gifted me a book, and it was called Atlas Shrugged. Now, Atlas Shrugged basically depicts almost, I mean, once I read the book, I was pretty aghast by the actual storyline. It was masterfully written, but certainly it left me very, very, because my nature, I was very curious about it, and it almost, I mean, I became very inquisitive, and I asked why this book and why it was gifted to me. The MD then later on told me that it was gifted to them by as a gift by their father, who's very high up in the Navy, and they also understood that I was very interested in their kind of what was the world affairs and geopolitics. I don't think the MD realized that I would be that inquisitive and I would ask so many questions about it. There came a point where basically they cut off because they knew that I was asking one too many questions, and the right sort of questions, maybe the sort of questions they didn't want me to ask. Anyway, so I mean, turns out that book, moving on, there's an individual who plays a central character in that book, and his name is John Galt, right? And actually, the theme behind the book is who is John Galt? Now, who wrote the book is even more interesting. Okay, John Galt is a character in Ayn Rand's book. Now, Ayn Rand is a pen name, a pseudonym to this woman, and she's quite she was a philosopher and a feminist. And interesting enough, she happened to be the mistress to one of the Rothschilds, right? And once I was doing research, I started studying this stuff. Now, what's interesting is the mistress of the Rothschild penned a book, and she wrote a book called Atlas Shrugged. And Atlas Shrugged goes all the way back to the occult and the mystery religions. And in that, in a nutshell, is post the post collapse of the American economy and how they basically then run this socialist kind of movement. And you see the rhetoric being coined by Obama as he exits his term, pointing and alluding towards that kind of socialist system. And I guess that's what they will implement when when the American economy collapses, and maybe perhaps they go about the enacting martial law. I certainly don't believe for a second or a moment that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton are going to be in the whole Oval Office. I think that Obama is going to run for a third term, and this is why the executive order to basically um, uh, repossess individual um, land, farming land, stock. There's all sorts of stuff that an executive order has been basically signed off for very recently by Obama, which is timely to say the least. At any rate, it seems like they're anticipating all of this on the horizon, and the only reason they're anticipating it is because it's been scripted and staged to happen between the power elites. And when I say the power elites, I mean the ones allied with Shaitan, Lanatullah alayh. They're Satanists of the highest degree. And again, their bloodline goes all the way to those individuals who have these very dark bloodlines. And are allied with those sort of dark forces. When I say dark forces, I mean the shayateen and instant jinn. And interesting enough, this book I always knew there was something very very dark about it, and that it alluded towards certain plans. Now, when I started doing research, I learned that Ayn Rand, and again, interesting enough, Ayn Rand is a play on the name Eye of Ra, right? And then you've got, interesting enough, if we let's find out right now, Ayn Rand, mistress of Rothschild. Let's see. Oh, Ayn Rand, mistress of Rothschild. John Todd's instruction to Atlas Shrugged. There you go. Well, there's enough anyway. If you do your research, Ayn Rand philosopher or just cunning Rothschild mistress, right? So as soon as I learned that she was the mistress of Rothschild, I knew that there's got to be a lot to it, simply because the Rothschilds are certainly at the top of this pyramidical structure for the satanic elite, and maybe perhaps very likely one of the 13 families. And interesting enough, in Islam we have the 12 tribes of Israel, whereas Shaitan Lanatullah plays with those numbers and has set up these 13 families, which are of dark bloodlines. Anyway, so you had John Galt, and you've got this whole thing, and where John Galt is basically a character in Ayn Rand's novel Atlas Shrugged, although it's a 1,500-page book, but very revealing. Although he's not identified by name until the last third of the novel, he is in the object of its often repeated question, who is John Galt? There you go, that's what we discussed about him being this individual, a mysterious individual, and of the quest to discover the answer. As the plots unfold, Galt is acknowledged to be a philosopher and inventor, which is very interesting. All of these individuals are always philosophers, they're alchemists, right? They're spiritualists, and he believes in the power of glory and the human mind. Again, it brings it down to the mind, and the power of the human mind is certainly alluding towards the pineal gland, which is above the 33rd vertebrae, right? And this is where it's all going: egoism, self-centeredness. Okay, he serves as a highly individualist, there you go, counterpoint to the collectivist, socialist, and economic structure, right? So, I mean, it's all about oneself and appeasing one's own kind of instinct and survivalist, and not having this kind of um, socialist kind of cohesive kind of approach to humanity and the world, and this oneness, as it were, in terms of like giving. Rather, this is all about whatever I've got to contribute is my own equity, and uh, my own to do with as I see fit, and not how others see fit. So anyway, it was a very interesting book, and from what I understood, it's pretty much what they've got on the cards for the states. For those of you who do live in the states and are interested in what you could maybe most likely see on the horizon soon happen and unfold in the country, then yeah, do read the book. It seems like it indicates and points towards what they've already got in mind, and what was already disclosed, maybe perhaps Ayn Rand as the mistress of one of the Rothschilds. So she maybe had the benefit of the doubt and foreknowledge before she wrote this book. So I mean, it's just interesting, and I thought I'd obviously draw attention to this particular issue. It's just a bit of research, and the dots are connecting. The Jerusalem Post had brought it together, and it led all the way to an individual who, at the top of that tree, happens to be um, John of Gaunt, which is interesting because Ayn Rand wrote a book, who is John Galt, and again, this individual seems to be like part of this whole, maybe a significant individual in the scheme of things and in terms of bloodlines. Certainly seems like over here anyway, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Again, Shaitan Lanatullah has been planning a millennia on this, and we understand in the occult they believe in invoking these dark forces whilst they basically have physical intercourse. So Islam, Muslims basically seek protection in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before they even approach their spouse, their wife, from shaitan and shayateen. Whereas in the occult, they in fact invoke them and allow these dark forces and shaitan landulali to enter their physical bodies. And during the process of this, uh, I guess, intercourse, the child that ensues is devoid of that I guess, uh, that protection that would be afforded to it, right? And it'd be devoid. The whole experience, the whole ritual is devoid of the I guess, of light, subhanallah, as it were. And the offsprings are then basically are allied and inclined towards the darker uh, um, darker forces. They're inclined towards um, darker traits and habits. They're devoid of that compassion and love, and they're more susceptible. I mean, shayateen become their awliya, right? And their friends, and it's very important. It's very sad, and we're not going to talk more about this, but the sort of practices that these individuals have and the sort of things they do, it's certainly on the opposite spectrum of what Islam teaches of love, kindness, compassion, tolerance, and protecting creation and humanity. Anyway, Jazakallah khairan wa jaza for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.